We have officially passed the 1 month mark. Yay! And today I am so looking forward to sharing a conversation with you that I had last week with Julia McCoy about the power of having a design mindset. Now, I talk a lot about mindset because, as I'm sure you've heard from so many people, so many authors, and pretty much anyone out there who is sharing why they were able to achieve what they did, almost every single person is going to attribute a significant portion to having the right mindset to being able to achieve what it is that you want. Now, like with most areas, we always hear the words like have a positive mindset, be resilient, and all those other things. Yet, what's often lacking is being able to really have the strategies and principles that will allow you to really dig into how to refine different areas so that you too can develop the skills it is that you need. So, a lot of times when talking about design thinking, it's often in reference to the creation of new products and new services. However, today what I really want to do is take a step back and think about the mindset of a designer and how it is they're able to go about creating these products and services. Because like I just said, it really starts with your mindset. When you begin to adopt these design thinking practices in different areas of your life, that's really when you'll start to see the power of a mindset emerge. And my favorite breakdown of the design thinking mindsets comes from IDEO. And I'm going to link their website where they talk about them all, and they have a nice video and a quote about each of the mindsets on their page. So I'll link that in the show notes. But basically, IDEO identify 8 mindsets that are absolutely fundamental to really building that mindset muscle so that you can enhance your ability to think like a designer. You know, when you think like a designer, I mean, if we take a step back and think about what did designers do, right? Designers really transform, like I said, not just products and services, but they transform organizations, the people around them, their relationships, the way they address challenges, the way they embrace opportunities. Design just really becomes a fundamental part of how you approach anything and everything. I always share with audiences when I'm speaking that one of the greatest lessons I've learned over the years is that a culture of innovation begins with a culture of empathy. And developing that sense of empathy begins by developing a design thinking mindset. If you remember from my episode last week with Jim Maroose, he shared what is probably my new favorite quote. Change is happening faster than ever before, yet it will never happen this slowly again. I really cannot stop thinking about that line because if you think about the people who are going to be successful in such a rapidly changing environment, it's really going to be the people who can adopt that design thinking mindset and really see things from the lens of a designer. And what that really helps with, I think, is not being overwhelmed, not seeing anything as unsurmountable or just seeing things as something that you can't achieve because they seem too overwhelming. But design thinking really allows you to take a step back and say, okay, this is a huge challenge or this is a huge opportunity, but what is step 1 going to be? And that's really what I love the most about it. So like I said, IDEO identify 8 qualities that make up the mindset of a designer. They are empathy, learning from failure, making, iterating, optimism, embracing ambiguity, and having creative confidence. All words that we know are so important that we hear people say are essential to being successful in today's world. Yet how do you actually go about developing those skills? So to examine exactly that and really also examine just how powerful these mindsets can be in creating change, it is with great enthusiasm that I introduce you today to Julia McCoy. So Julia just came out with a new book called Woman Rising, and we are going to be talking a lot about that book today. But Julia is a serial content marketer. She's an entrepreneur. And like I just shared, she is also an author. She founded a multi-million-dollar content agency called Express Writers, which you are absolutely going to want to check out because the strategies that she shares in there are absolutely incredible. But Julia started that multi-million-dollar content agency with nothing more than $75 in her pocket at 19 years old. Today, Julia has been named an industry thought leader in content marketing by Forbes. She's an author of 2 other best-selling books, and she's also the creator of The Content Hacker, a resource for growth-focused content marketers. Like I said today, we are going to be discussing Julia's latest and 3rd book, a genre-defying nonfiction narrative memoir called Woman Rising, and it launches in February of 2020. You can go onto Amazon and you can purchase it there. And you can also follow her on Twitter at Julia E. McCoy. And as always, I will link contact information in the show notes. I hope you guys are excited to listen and that you'll share your favorite parts, any questions that you have with Julia and me online. So here we go. I'm excited to introduce you to Julia McCoy.
How do you navigate change? It's a question we think about often, and one that today's world expects us to be comfortable with. The challenge, however, is where do you begin, and how do you develop the mindset and skill set to be successful? Welcome, everyone, to the Sprint to Success with Design Thinking podcast. I'm your host, Saba Kidwai. Join me each week as I share the stories and strategies from the world's leading researchers and practitioners about why they believe the answer lies in practicing design thinking.
Hi, Julia. Welcome to Sprint to Success.
Thank you so much, Saba. Is that right?
It
How
is
I'm saying
right. It is
okay, good.
right. Yes.
Like I should have asked you first.
No, I mean, that's kind of the beauty of like getting to know people online. And then it's like, wait a minute, that's actually Ask Miss Q. Is it really your name? You know?
Well, I wouldn't. Yeah, Instagram handle being your name. Nope.
So, Julia, when I first started following you, one of the things that immediately struck me about you was how you really just embodied all of the different mindsets of a design thinker. And design thinking is sort of one of the areas of my research and my dissertation. And one of the things about design thinking is a lot of people think, you know, it's about creating a product or creating a service, but it's really about being able to develop a mindset that sets you up to do all of these other things. And you have such an incredible story. You know, $75 at 19 years old, you set out to create just this completely different life for yourself. And I would just love to have you share with our audience what your story is before, 19, after, and just how you became this woman rising.
Thank you. What a beautiful intro. Yeah, so let's see. Well, the hard part for me these days is nutshelling it, right? Because I'm publishing a 400-page book on the topic.
I was wondering that same thing. I was like, I'm so excited to hear how she tells her story. I struggle to tell mine, which is so small. So, yeah, please go ahead.
No, I've been writing for 8 years and it's still, long form content is my jam. So short content really isn't, but we will get there. So let's see, let's start in the beginning. So yes. So back in 2011, just like you said, I really had nothing. In fact, like how I say in the book is I had less than nothing because I was actually inside of a toxic environment. I was living inside of my father's cult in Pennsylvania. And we wore long dresses, like everything you think when you hear the word cult, that was us. Like not Handmaid's Tale extreme, but what's interesting about Handmaid's Tale, that's based on fundamentalism, which is the same vein my father had. So same cult.
Wow.
But so at 19 years old, I found myself going through college. I was halfway through an RN degree. And I realized, oops, this is not something I would be good at, number one. And number two, I would not enjoy this. Having people's lives in your hands is that's really scary, crazy place to be. So I was getting halfway through it. And then I realized, okay, I need to change this up. And I just had a spark one morning. And the spark was, what do I love to do? And how can I make money doing that? And I decided to just go all in and pursue that. And if I go backwards, back at 13, I had learned how to make money online. Luckily, the internet was not taboo in our household, which is strange, but I'm so thankful for that because that was my lifeline. So I had a ton of interest in the internet. I knew like that was probably going to be my future home, but I had no idea to what extent that it's become today. So I just went full force. How do I make money writing? 3 months later, I had this baby brand that I had just started, and I had clients like crazy, and I was just learning and doing. And that's how I was learning, right? By actually doing the content myself. So I like to say the first year, Express Writers was Express Writer because it was just me. Like the first year we did 30K and my net profit was 10K, but I was thrilled because, I was a college dropout and worked at McDonald's. So that was way better than that. But each year, our income just continued to triple, quadruple. And what really was the catalyst was escaping that toxic environment in 2012. And luckily enough, I had met someone who hired me to write his content. And we had this instant spark as soon as we first chatted on the phone. And it led to me marrying him 3 months later.
Oh my God.
Just like that. And this is all in the book. It's wild, but it's 100% true. And he was the catalyst for what happened the next few years, which was just doubling, quadrupling, continuing to where 2018, we hit our first $1 million year. So my business growth was just slow and steady, and it all originated from a place of passion. And then it just came down to hard work and patience. If you want to build a brand that lasts, you have to be patient. And that's so hard today. That's hard because we want to see fast success. We want to see results quickly. But 9 years later, we didn't hit our $1 million year until 8 years later. But it was so worth it because when we did, it was like, yes, we are a legitimate business. I mean, we were, but when you grow to that extent, it's an amazing feeling.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think, it is hard to be patient these days and to really value that, especially when you're seeing so much success of everybody else all around you. I mean, that's kind of what most people share. Exactly, right? And really, I mean, it trickles across all platforms. People share so much of like, this is all the positive. It's like, how do we, kind of share a little bit more of what led up to that? So yeah, I mean, I think for young people, it's definitely, I think even older people, it's such a huge challenge. But I think people who are listening are probably like, wait, back up a minute. You grew up in a cult? Like, whoa, like tell me a little bit more. And I'd love to frame these, like I said, around the design thinking mindsets. And so one of the ones that immediately kind of comes to mind is, one of the design thinking mindsets is how do we become comfortable with ambiguity? Right? So like, for example, you share how you had the internet, you knew maybe there was something there, but actually taking action onto that and being like, okay, I'm going to go try something is a huge mindset shift that really needs to take place and happen. Tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up and how you became comfortable taking that step, and perhaps even what some of maybe the different conflicting things in your head might have been in trying and even thinking about doing that.
Yes. Great question. Well, it's funny for me because, my start in life, my first years of life were so hard. The physical abuse element was really bad, and I had a really raw start in life. And I think what happened to my mindset from going through that was there's nothing worse than this. So you know what? I might as well try it anyway and become a risk taker. And so that just shaped my mindset to have like no fear of taking risks. And I just carried that. That's one thing I've carried out of that environment. And when you're in a toxic environment and the person that's supposed to love you is doing the very opposite, it kind of, it can either break you. I've seen it either break people or do what it did to me, which is, you know what, I'm going to follow my passion, not give a crap what anyone thinks because no one loves me anyway, as bad as that sounds. So that's kind of what it did to me. It didn't break my spirit. Instead, it encouraged me to be a risk taker. And that's a message I'm sharing in my book, is that if that's something you went through, you can celebrate that, embrace that, and use that to fuel risk taking, which is crazy to think about, right? Because Trauma is trauma. But if we turn around and embrace that and say, okay, I'm a strong person and I can go challenge my fears and do all these things and maybe be successful, even though I'm not sure I will be, it's totally worth that risk.
Is there anything in particular you would say that maybe allowed you to do that? Or if somebody else in your position, say, is maybe going through something very similar to you right now and is thinking, how can I be like her? Like, how can I think like that? What might you say?
Yes, that's a great question. I'm actually working on, I've been asked that so often, I'm working on like a concept that'll probably come out in my next book, which like, okay, Julia, get one book out at a time, right? This book's out Monday. But true story. My next book will definitely be on that topic. Like, what are the systemized steps you can take to build something like I've built? And what's crazy is I think I kind of accidentally stumbled on the secrets to success. And those secrets are pretty basic. Number one, find your passion. Find something you love to do, something that lights you up every day, gets you out of bed, you're excited about. If you don't have that, life is going to be really hard. And you'll be stuck 20, 30 years doing something that just isn't fun. So number one, find a passion. And then once you find a passion, then it's all about practice. Put that into practice and see how far you can get just even starting out and getting a few gigs, working on the side. So just get going. Starting is the hardest part. And then after that, it's all about kind of repeating that cycle and continuing to build your skills.
I love that. I think that, yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that's so helpful, especially being able to like identify. Usually what happens very haphazardly, you identify. People think like one day your passion just appears, but no, it's usually very haphazard from a series of different things that you've engaged
Yes.
in. Yeah. No,
Yes.
So I absolutely, yeah, no, I love that. And so I want to go into like now, like the second design thinking mindset that I wanted to touch on with you, and that's creative confidence. You know, so like lots of people have ideas, you know, maybe people, whether they're struggling, whether they're in the best of scenarios, have these ideas, but there's a really big difference between the people who have the ideas and the people that actually execute on them through that creative confidence and that belief in, yes, I can. And so I'm just a little bit curious about some of the things, first of all, how it is you developed this passion for writing at 13 years old, I think you said, you know, through the internet. How did you develop this passion for writing? And then tell us a little bit about your creative confidence in being able to actually launch out that idea and what that journey was like.
Yes. So stories, and I have a chapter about this in my book. Early on, I think I was reading books meant for teenagers at 7 and 8 years old. It's true stories. I was reading Shakespeare at 7, like sitting by the fireplace and reading 3 hours of Shakespeare. So one good thing that came out of that environment that I was in, we were homeschooled, never went to public school, was definitely the focus on vocabulary and reading. So once I was introduced to reading and then given, you know, we could go to the library whenever we wanted, whenever I was given that access, the side effect of going through physical trauma is if you have an outlet, that outlet becomes a lifeline. So books kind of became my lifeline, and I was living another reality sometimes through those books. And then I would just create a reality. I would start writing scenes, characters, stories. And so I was doing that at, 7, 8, 9 years old. I wrote this 200-page book when I was 12. And like I would sit in my chair and write it without eating, drinking for hours.
Wow.
It was like my thing. So being introduced to it early on definitely was an unexpected blessing. And then just having that as a lifeline was accidental. That wasn't something that someone predicted or studied to make happen. It was just an accidental side effect of being in that environment. It's looking to live through stories. And that definitely influenced my ability to write and create content.
I love that idea about, you know, I think that's so powerful. They always say, you know, people who are surrounded by books, you know, really develop a passion for reading and writing. And so I'm so happy for you that you were able to have that outlet. But I'd love to learn a little bit more about, like, you know, where your confidence came from to be able to actually be like, oh, I have this idea and I'm actually going to go out and do it. Very few people, I feel like, actually do the in-between. What are some of the things you did to kind of get you from one phase to the next?
I would say, as simple as it sounds, and this is tough to get to because it's so easy to overshadow this with doubts. But the bottom line for me was I never second guessed my gut. And that was something that I don't know if I was born with it or it was shaped through kind of going through trauma and having to tiptoe around that and really like kind of create my own reality and bend to a lot of legalistic rules. But outside of that, it was just whenever it was my turn to do something, I just followed my gut and went full force and never second guessed that. And I think too many people today, they stop to doubt their gut. Okay, well, what if, right? What if someday? And those things can really kill creative products from even happening. So we have to stop second guessing ourselves. Like, we are talented people. We're born with talent, and we need to just go and use that to the best of our abilities.
I absolutely love that. And I want to pause for a moment and actually read a quote from your book, because I think you shared this the other day and I actually screenshotted it because I was like, wow, that is so powerful. It's from page 182 and it says, "One of the biggest lessons I've taken from my brand beginnings, which has grown into a multi-million-dollar agency now 8 years later, is the incredible importance of trusting your gut at all moments of your life's path. No one else is living your life but you. We were each given gut instincts and gut sense for a reason. No one else can feel as clearly as you the trajectory your future should be on. All of us are born with this authentic gut drive." And I think that that is so powerful because it really is that, yeah, I mean, Seth Godin talks about this, right? The lizard brain, that voice in your head that you're constantly battling with. And you always hear that negative voice, the one that gives you doubt. But it's really, how do you allow the positive voice, the one that's going to encourage you, the one that knows what you're capable of, to really emerge as the more powerful voice in your head? And so I think that that is just so important.
Yes. And one thing that will help that voice emerge is having more routine-based like meditation time. And for everyone that looks different, but you have to go internal, right? Because we're external 24/7. We have like social media platforms are either emerging or there's ones being added. Now we have TikTok. We have all these things to watch and do and see and consume. And that kills that ability to listen to what's inside of us, that creative gut instinct. So for me, like every morning starts with 30 minutes of nothingness where I'm sitting, I'm doing yoga, meditating, praying, and I'm not consuming anything. And that's so vital to the rest of my day, actually being creative and being able to listen to that voice without, oops, oh, here's a distraction. Oh, this distraction leads me to believe this. And that's just a path that gets crazy. So it's so important to step back from the noise so we can hear that inner voice that we all have.
Yeah, absolutely. I would actually say that's a practice that I've implemented recently, not so much the meditation, but more of just, I would wake up this morning and the first thing that would fill my head was the to-do list of the emails and the this and the that. And in being so overwhelmed with everything, I would actually not have productive mornings. And so I actually went back to a practice from when I was like way younger, and that was just buying a planner. And so every morning I have like a little bit more of a journaling practice, and I really use a physical planner now to map out what my to-do lists are, and then I will go over and kind of like feel like I have a little bit more control of how I'm using the digital tools, my phone, my laptop, to do certain tasks versus letting those tools kind of control me and what I need to do. So I couldn't agree more.
So well said.
So helpful.
Yeah.
So helpful.
It's not about letting them control you. It's about controlling them.
Absolutely.
I think Brian Fanzo says that. It's like, you can control your feed, you don't have to complain about people.
That's
you can unfollow.
Right. And it applies to so many areas. You're absolutely right. That energy comes from so many places and so many sources. And, I think absolutely social feeds are definitely a huge one. You have all these incredible things that are going on. I would love for you to highlight another design thinking mindset, and that is this idea of being able to learn from failure. So the idea that you're constantly like experimenting along the way, not necessarily, I think a lot of people when they say learn from failure think it means that you're going to fall flat on your face and all these horrible things are going to happen to you. But really it's more about shifting your mindset to thinking about how can you just be more experimental. So tell us about maybe a few things that you experimented with that perhaps didn't go as planned or maybe led you on a bit of a different path.
Yes. Well, that's a big part of the story in part two of my book, The Making of Success, because the last chapter actually is success. So all the chapters leading up to chapter 28 is what happened before. There's 27 chapters. So success did not come quickly. There were many years of, hard things, and as much as he's hated, Gary Vaynerchuk makes a really great point about this, where he says he basically ate dog crap. I'll use the other word, for 10 years in the basement where he was putting wine boxes on the conveyor belt. And like, that's the other side. And that's one reason I'm sharing this book. That's the other side of the entrepreneurial journey that we don't see. We see, what happened after. But my last chapter is success. And before that chapter is one called catastrophe, where we had this mega failure, and it was from me being naive, like completely naive, doing really stupid crap. And you can't really learn how to be successful unless you get through walking through those trenches, especially if you're like me, like someone who really learns well from just doing. I went to college, I dropped out, I wasn't able to use any of that in what I do today. If anything, I had to unlearn, like the AP essay style of writing. Specifically. So for me, college was a hindrance. For others, not so much, depending on what you go for. But in certain fields, an instituted style of learning is nowhere near as beneficial as just learning from failure. And it's important to not be afraid of what can happen. And you may fall flat on your face. That's okay, because you can always pick yourself back up. There is that option. So remembering that is critical to moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited to read that chapter of the book. I love that it's these catastrophes before the making of success, because that really usually is exactly how the trajectory grows for most people. But I want to touch on that idea that you brought up of like all these things that you had to unlearn, and I think that's that's a big thing that I think a lot of people struggle with today, is they've gone through these very institutionalized places of learning. What are your thoughts on that? Like, I know you've got like a beautiful little girl who's going through school right now. What are some of your thoughts around that?
Yes. Well, I do think one thing that I didn't get growing up, because we didn't go to public school ever, was social skills. So I was sadly really lacking, and it's a good thing I could do everything remotely, because in person I was less than average, I would say. So my social skills have only come over time and challenging fear and pushing myself out there. So that is one really good thing from going through institutionalized learning, is you learn how to interact with your peers. And that one trait, I would say, is like, when I think of Jaina, my 5-year-old in school, that one trait may help her be a successful entrepreneur. And then the other traits, well, I think they might be up to me to teach her, because in school you don't learn how to think for yourself. You learn how to, use their formulas, their processes, and you get a big red X if you don't go by their style. And that sucks, because that's really not how life goes. You have to fail. You have to get that X, and not be afraid of it, in order to get the green check mark, to get to where you want to go with success. So with her, I'm trying to teach her that we just launched a YouTube channel, Jaina's Universe, as you know, and I'm trying to teach her through doing that. Like, we have mic failures, we have all kinds of tech issues, and I show her it. I show her how it sounds when we didn't get, audio quality, and she's frustrated, but I tell her it's okay, we can do it again. And she enjoys that. Like, she's really grown from all of that. And our goal is just to have fun doing it. And I'm able to instill that into her. And that's so exciting. So exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I have absolutely loved watching that journey. I mean, when you did that initial post of like, this is Jaina's Universe, this is what we're going to be doing, I was like, that's such a beautiful way of, I think, really just bringing your daughter a little bit into your world and really modeling for her a lot of the skills perhaps that maybe she's not getting from, say, her formal place of schooling. What are some of the things that she's kind of learned along the way, or some memorable moments that you guys have had through that process? I mean, I know it's new, but...
Yes. Oh, so many good moments, honestly. I was, Yeah, we've only done, I think we're on our 7th episode. We just started this January. It was a kind of a New Year resolution to get her channel out because she was asking me for a whole year, can I YouTube, Mommy? She's 5. So she's aware of the world out there, which is really cool. And that is one opportunity. Back when I was 5, we were on a dial-up modem when I was 7. So this opportunity didn't exist for 5-year-olds. And the world's top YouTuber, I think, is 7, Ryan's World.
Oh, right, yeah.
And he's the top earning. And then it's Jana's favorite is Like Nastia is the channel name. And she's from Russia. And she's earning like 10 million a year. And she's 5. So these opportunities are amazing. And our goal, though, was definitely not, just monetary, because then I think you lose the focus of having fun and enjoying the process. So some of the things she's learned, for one thing, I let her pick her guests. So she has guests on her show, and it's funny. It's funny how much she watches me because we have 90 people. I do a lot of hiring and firing, and I don't realize how much she watches me. So there was one moment where after we had filmed an episode, we put it out, published it. The next day, she's like, Mom, I'm going to fire that friend. And I'm like, Jana, you can't fire a friend. That's not how this works. But she's watched me and heard me and seen me have to hire and fire. Like, that's my reality of running a successful business. You have to let weaklings go and build a top performing team. So she was trying to apply that to people that she's not paying to come on her show. So I was able to teach her, how to think differently. So it's not like we want to fire our friends. No, we want to have patience with them. And so she's actually had the friend come back on. And she wants to do more with her. And she got over she's a lot like me. She wants to control situations. Like, that is my weak link. I want to control everything. And when one thing doesn't go right, I'm so frustrated. And I see that trait in her. So her learning to just let go and kind of let what happens happen. Like, if your friend talks over you, that's okay. Keep going. You can get your time to talk in the next 5 minutes and, say things nicely. So those things she has been learning and really using. And I think those have directly contributed to her social skills, because she's emerging from this with more skills socially. She's already an extrovert, so...
No, I love that, because we know that communication is such a buzzword today, but it's such an important skill. But hearing you say some of those things that, she's learning along the way, really you're defining out such nuances of what it means to be an effective communicator. In the real world, and it's hard to get, I think, those skills sometimes otherwise. Was it a big decision for you and your husband? Should we let her do this? Should we not? I feel like so many kids these days, I think it's one of the number one jobs that kids want these days is to be a YouTuber. But I feel like it's a very controversial issue still amongst a lot of people. What was that like for you guys as parents?
Yes, that was definitely a big debate. And that's why we were holding off every time she asked, can you start a YouTube channel for me? Because I YouTube, and it's such a great traffic stream. I've been doing it for 3 years, writing blogs for 8. So kind of 3 years into the YouTube atmosphere, but she watches me do it. That's why she's been asking. But for us, the decision was we need to be really careful that she doesn't turn into someone that isn't authentic. So some of the kids that she'll watch on YouTube, they definitely put on a show, and you can sense that, versus the kids that are just being themselves, playing, having fun, doing whatever it is kids do to have fun, crazy, silly crap. So versus putting on a show. So we didn't want her to become a more spoiled, entitled version of herself. So it took a while to decide on it. And we talked to her about, what it is that she wants to do with her show and how can we set some goals. So our mission, I asked her if she wanted to do a mission statement, explained to her that's something that we do in my businesses. And took a couple days. She was really thrown off by the whole idea. It took a minute for her little brain to wrap around that. But once it did, and she realized, I can make a difference with this. Then her little sweet attitude really came forward, and she's like, She's like, I want to share my heart. And then she went on to say, like, I want to share Jesus's heart with my audience. And that came out after, waiting a day to see what she was going to process. She's 5. I didn't expect anything. But that came out. So I was like, okay, we're doing this. We're YouTubing. Because if that's your goal, then that's the right kind of goal to have, rather than, oh, let's make a lot of money. Let's see how many toys we can get. And that was what she was thinking about at first, was how many toys can I get? So it was a process, and we kept talking to her, and I spent a lot of time with her. I find that really important. Like, I try to stop my day at 3 so I can spend time with her. Some days I can't, reality, but the days that I can, we really get some good lessons through to her, because I'm just trying to, as much as I can, instill this mindset, which is really the difference between not having a clear life path versus having a clear life path, and building a legacy, which is something that, I think a lot of young people, they don't have a vision for that. It's because it's not being taught. It's something that's missed.
Absolutely. And I think, I was going to say that, like, hearing you share that story, like, I think you really helped her get to the importance of purpose. Right. And I think ultimately, I think that's what drives people as human beings. And I think being able to connect with that, especially at such a young age, again, is going to allow her to really experiment more and just be so much more aware, I think, of how to approach things, given that, she's a little bit more purpose driven from such a young age, which, again, you're absolutely right, is so, so, so rare. So, it's so interesting, to kind of hear the story of, like, your relationship with your daughter and how, she's growing up versus, like, what your relationship was like with your dad and, like, kind of how you grew up. I think oftentimes, I know I really struggled with this in, like, my own personal situation, but I think one of the hardest things sometimes for a lot of people is being able to let go of the anger, any resentment, or any of those kinds of things, which brings me to another one of the design thinking mindsets, and that's empathy. I know one of the pieces of advice that I got one time was, like, stop trying to understand this person because their brain just works differently. You're never going to be able to contextualize them in how you're thinking, and, because we all think differently, we all act differently, we have different reasons for things. But thinking about empathy, and now when you reflect back upon, your family situation, or even just some of the extended people around you, what does that look like for you?
Yes, that's a really great point. Yeah, that's something that I didn't have growing up at all. We had the opposite. We were kind of forced into a box that Dad created and never allowed to find ourselves, get in touch with ourselves. So there was no empathy in that at all. There was a lot of narcissism and ego from our father. So one good thing since leaving that is, I feel like I know what not to do because of the pain that all of that caused and involved. So knowing all of that, I have this really, and I talk about this in the book too, there were moments in my life growing up where sometimes one smile, like one genuine smile, and you can tell when someone really means it, when they look at you and they just like, your smile, we're on video. But that made all the difference for me sometimes, in having a hard day and just, like, crying through my day versus being able to pick myself up and do my tasks and get through my day without shedding a bunch of tears. So that empathy from a total stranger, many times growing up, that happens. Those are moments that I remember so clearly. And because I remember them so clearly, I think about strangers differently, because I was that person one time working at McDonald's that wore a skirt, acted weird, and didn't get a lot of kindness. And the few bits of kindness I got, those memories, those faces stick in my head. Like, I can still picture the faces that were kind. And that's crazy, right? That's crazy how that works. So that's something I'm trying to teach Jaina. And my kid she kind of amazes me because she has love towards all people. In fact, that's what she was saying last night at family time. She's like, I love everybody in the world. And that was all by herself. So it's like she's teaching me empathy. These little kids, they love so freely. And that's something that's kind of a lost art.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, speaking of smiling and kindness and all these things, I want to kind of wrap up with one of my last design thinking mindsets, and that is a sense of optimism. Just this belief that things are possible. And it's really one of the most powerful things about design thinking is when you're thinking about challenges, even if you're thinking about opportunities, being able to think of everything in terms of how might we opens the door to the idea that there is possibility. Where does your optimism come from, and how do you fuel that optimism?
Great question. There's one sentence in my book where I talk about this perspective that I was given from what I escaped. And that perspective was basically, if you were to put anything up against living in a cult, I'd rather do whatever it is that choice is. So it gives me a pretty raw perspective of anything is better than that. And that's a really simple thought, but especially for survivors, it's easy to picture that perspective. But I think a lot of survivors don't realize that that's actually a superpower, because once you put everything into perspective, right? And that's gratitude. Gratitude really plays in. But you realize all we have, like we can wake up and breathe. We can go about our day with freedom. We're not, in captivity. And I was once in captivity, so I'm really thankful for my freedom. And that perspective has given me a lot of optimism, where I have a lot of joy. I enjoy doing what I do. And then the other side of it is doing what I love fills me with so much happiness. And that gives me that perspective of, okay, if I try this and fail, it's not so bad, because I enjoyed it anyway. So optimism really comes down to like gratitude, using the right perspective, and then really living in, like you were saying, purpose and passion.
Awesome. And I know we've touched a little bit on what your business is, but, I would imagine if somebody was listening or even thinking about, okay, yeah, maybe I do want to pursue something, or, maybe I want to start a YouTube channel or start a blog. I read this crazy statistic. I think you just posted it yesterday about how there's over like 2 billion websites, but only X number are really read. And I feel like you're so amazing at like teaching these like nitty gritty strategies about how to be able to really get your content recognized. Can you share a little bit about some of your resources, some of your course offerings? I mean, you just offer so much. So like, I'd love to have you just kind of share for people a little bit more about your business, what you do, and what perhaps they could benefit from in visiting your website.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Well, so my primary agency is Express Writers, and that's where I have consistent blog content coming out. So our blog there is called The Right Blog, and I publish every Tuesday, and my goal is just to share really useful, like you said, and I'm so glad that you see that happening. That's my goal, is to share really practical advice on the topics of content creation, content marketing, how do we create content for our business and see actual ROI. Because way back at the beginning, 2011, with Express Writers, I decided to kind of make my mission statement as simple as, I'm going to be what we sell. And I had no idea how well that would work. So my goal was to pull in 100% of our clients through content. And then I was going to write and lead all that content. And it's been a lot of just implementing, testing, and seeing what works, and then repeating what works. So a lot of that in content creation, it's either overlooked in all of the noise of, platforms we could try, right? FOMO, don't want to miss out. So we're doing all the things. And what we lose in that is focus. If you focus on, the keyword is mastery. If you focus on mastering 1 or 2 platforms, with blogging, YouTubing, you're going to see so much more success in ROI in the long run, rather than doing all the things that, they recommend a business owner does to get on the map. So think about mastering and your 1 or 2 channels for success.
Love it. And so I just want to really kind of share again, how practical so much of your advice is. I think I read an article a couple of weeks ago down to like how to organize your headlines to get the best,
That's
SEO. Like that was, it was so detail oriented. I was like, wow, this is really incredible. And my headings definitely do not look like that. And so I just want to iterate again how useful a lot of your resources are. And I really encourage a lot of people to go check them out. Anything else, Julia, that you would like to share about the book coming up, or anything else with the audience before we wrap up today?
Thank you for asking. Well, I think going back to the resources, most of them live now at my personal brand, which I launched in 2018, kind of as an answer to the question I got all the time, which was, Julia, where's the one place we can go to see all the things you do? So that's contenthacker.com. And got really lucky. I was able to buy the domain and even get the trademark. So officially on paper, I'm the content hacker, which is pretty dang cool, I gotta say. But contenthacker.com is definitely a long-term approach for me. So that's where my books are getting posted. So links to all of my books, links to my courses that I teach. And I also post like once a month. I focus on creating long-form guides on that site. So how to do everything A to Z in content creation for solopreneurs could be a topic. So that's where to go for my guides. And with the book coming out, Woman Rising, A True Story, that will be out, I think, when your podcast is, when this episode is published.
I believe so. I think 2 days after it. Absolutely, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Very cool. So if you are on Amazon, and you just type in Woman Rising, you'll see all formats. I think we're just waiting on the hardback to propagate, but all the formats are there. So Audible, if that's your jam, Kindle, paperback, all of that will be live. And I'm really excited about that book. That's a whole different perspective on entrepreneurship, really. And, just like we talked, using your failures and what made you tough in life, trauma, pain, using all of that to tap into your superpowers that we all have and creating a legacy for yourself. And it's the raw story of what I went through. So it's very narrative. So I will warn you, it's hard to put down once you start reading it.
As all good stories are.
True fact.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Julia. I'm so excited to have, people just learn more about your story, learn more about Woman Rising, and, really hope that this inspires and encourages people to rise and become their best selves as well. So thank you so much for being here.
Amen to that. Thank you so much for having me on, Saba. I really enjoyed this.
What I love most about design is the optimism that it empowers you with to believe, yes, how might we address this challenge, or how might we embrace this opportunity? It really moves us from feeling powerless and overwhelmed to feeling completely in control and knowing that even if the task ahead is really, really, really big, that we can break it down into the small steps and work our way towards making progress with a design mindset. I hope you left this episode just as inspired as I am by Julia's story. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd love if you could take a moment to rate and review the show. Knowing what brings you here and hearing from you about what resonated and what specific ideas you enjoyed really just helps me design and deliver episodes that will be of value to you each week. I really invite you to reach out to me and the guests that come on this show. And as always, like I said, I've linked the information in the show notes. Trust me when I say it absolutely makes someone's day when you tell them what you enjoyed about what they shared. People always ask me wow, how do you get people onto your podcast? And I'm always reminding people that everybody loves sharing their story and everybody loves talking about the things that excite them and that they're passionate about with just about anyone and everyone who's willing to listen. So, like I said, it totally makes someone's day when you tell them what you enjoyed about what it is that they've shared, not to really mention the influence that it can have on your career and how you build and grow your network. You never know what conversation will lead you to what opportunity. I'd also love if you could take a moment to leave a review for the podcast. Leaving a review for the podcast really helps others learn about the show, giving them the gift of knowledge and allowing this community to help create access and exposure to ideas, opportunities, and people that others may not even know exist. So thanks everyone so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Sprint to Success, and I will see you again with another episode next week. Have an amazing day, everyone. Bye.
It's your turn to join the conversation by sharing what you enjoyed or what questions you still have. In a world where time and attention are so valuable, thank you for choosing to listen and for being a part of our Sprint to Success with Design Thinking community.